The day my mother died, it felt as if the world had stopped turning. I remember standing beside her hospital bed, holding her frail hand as the machines around us grew silent. She had been fighting illness for years, and although I knew the day would eventually come, nothing could have prepared me for the emptiness that followed. My mother wasn't just my parent. She was my best friend, my protector, and the only person in my family who truly believed in me. Whenever life became difficult, she stood beside me. Whenever others doubted me, she encouraged me to keep going. As I left the hospital that night, I felt completely alone. The funeral took place 3 days later. Friends, neighbors, and relatives filled the small church. Everyone spoke about my mother's kindness and generosity. Some cried, others shared stories about how she had helped them during difficult times. My family sat in the front row pretending to mourn. At the time, I didn't notice anything unusual. Grief had clouded my judgment, but looking back now, I realized they were already thinking about something else. The house, my mother's house, wasn't luxurious. It was a modest two-story home that she had worked her entire life to pay off. Every room carried memories of our lives together. The kitchen still smelled like the cinnamon cookies she baked every Sunday. The living room walls displayed old family photographs. The backyard contained a beautiful garden she had spent years nurturing. To outsiders, it was simply a house. To me, it was home. A week after the funeral, my uncle called a family meeting. "We need to discuss your mother's estate," he said. I trusted him. After all, he was family. We gathered around the dining table where my mother and I had shared countless meals. My uncle sat at the head of the table while my older brother and aunt listened quietly. "Don't worry," my uncle assured me. "Everything will be handled properly." I nodded. At that moment, I had no reason to doubt him. Over the next few weeks, they repeatedly told me not to concern myself with legal matters. They claimed lawyers were reviewing documents and sorting out paperwork. "Focus on healing," my aunt would say. "We'll take care of everything." Their kindness seemed genuine. It wasn't. Months passed. One afternoon, I decided to visit the house after staying temporarily with a friend. I wanted to spend some time surrounded by memories of my mother. But as I approached the property, something felt wrong. A moving truck stood in the driveway. Several unfamiliar cars were parked outside. Confused, I walked toward the front door. Then I noticed the locks had been changed. My heart began racing. I knocked repeatedly. A stranger opened the door. "Can I help you?" he asked. I stared at him in disbelief. "This is my mother's house." The man looked uncomfortable. "I bought this property 2 months ago." His words felt like a punch to the chest. "What are you talking about?" He explained that he had legally purchased the house from the listed owners and had moved in recently. I could barely breathe. Without saying another word, I drove straight to my uncle's home. When he opened the door, I demanded answers. His expression remained calm. "The house belongs to your brother now," he said casually. "What? Your mother left it to him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's impossible." My mother had repeatedly told me the house would be mine one day. I had cared for her throughout her illness while the rest of the family rarely visited. Yet suddenly they claimed she had changed her mind. My brother appeared beside my uncle with a smug smile. "Move on," he said. "The house is gone." The words shattered something inside me. I looked from one face to another, searching for even a trace of guilt. There was none, only cold indifference. As I stood there, I realized the painful truth. The people I had trusted most had betrayed me. They hadn't just taken a house. They had stolen the last piece of my mother that remained in this world. And deep in my heart, I knew this story was far from over. After discovering that my mother's house had been sold, I felt as though my entire world had collapsed. For weeks, I barely slept. Every night, memories of my mother filled my mind. I kept replaying our final conversations, searching for something I might have missed. She had always been careful with important matters. She wasn't the type of person to suddenly change her plans without telling me. The more I thought about it, the less sense the situation made. Why would she leave the house to my brother? During her illness, he rarely visited. Sometimes months passed without a single phone call. While he enjoyed his life, my mother and I faced every hospital appointment, every difficult treatment, and every sleepless night together. She had often thanked me for staying by her side. One memory returned to me again and again. About 6 months before her death, we had been sitting in the backyard watching the sunset. She smiled and squeezed my hand. "No matter what happens after I'm gone," she said softly, "don't let anyone take away what's meant for you." At the time, I assumed she was talking about my future. Now those words felt different, almost like a warning. Determined to uncover the truth, I began contacting lawyers. Unfortunately, every meeting ended the same way. The documents presented by my family appeared legitimate. The property records showed ownership had been transferred. The supposed will named my brother as the beneficiary. Without evidence, there was little anyone could do. My relatives took advantage of the situation. Whenever I questioned them, they accused me of being greedy. When I asked for explanations, they mocked me. Some family members even stopped speaking to me entirely. Before long, rumors spread throughout the community. People began believing I was trying to steal my brother's inheritance. The lies hurt almost as much as losing my mother. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through several boxes I had rescued from storage, I came across some of my mother's old belongings. Most contained ordinary items: photographs, recipes, holiday decorations, letters from old friends. I nearly stopped searching when I noticed something unusual. At the back of her bedroom closet stood an old sewing machine cabinet. My mother hadn't used it in years. Curious, I opened one of the lower compartments. Inside, hidden beneath folded fabric, was a small metal box. My hands trembled. I had never seen it before. The lock wasn't secured. Slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside were several photographs, a few pieces of jewelry, and a sealed envelope. My heart skipped a beat. Written across the front in my mother's familiar handwriting were two simple words: "For my child." Tears immediately filled my eyes. Carefully, I opened the envelope. The letter inside was dated just 4 months before her death. As I began reading, my entire body froze. "My dear child, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. There is something important you need to know. I do not trust certain members of our family. Over the years, I have seen how greed changes people. If anything happens to me, some may try to take what belongs to you. That is why I have taken precautions. The original property deed is not kept in the house. It is stored safely where no one can access it without my permission. Follow the instructions attached to this letter. Trust the truth, trust yourself, and never give up." By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Attached to the letter was a bank document containing information about a safety deposit box. The next morning, I drove to the bank. My pulse raced the entire journey. After verifying my identity, the bank manager escorted me to a private room. Moments later, he placed a small container on the table. Inside lay several documents. The moment I saw them, I knew everything had changed. There it was, the original deed to my mother's house, official, stamped, registered, and most importantly, it clearly listed me as the rightful heir. For months, my family had convinced everyone that I was powerless, but now I held proof that their story was built on lies. As I stared at the documents, a feeling I hadn't experienced since my mother's death finally returned. Hope, and for the first time, I realized that justice might still be possible. The moment I held the original deed in my hands, everything changed. For months, I had been treated like a liar. My family had painted me as the greedy child who couldn't accept my mother's final wishes. Relatives stopped returning my calls. Neighbors whispered whenever I walked by. Even some of my closest friends had begun to question my story. But now I finally had the truth, and the truth was stronger than every lie they had told. I immediately contacted a respected attorney and showed him the documents from the safety deposit box. He spent several days examining every page. When he finally called me into his office, his expression was serious. "These documents are authentic," he said. "I felt my heart pound. What does that mean?" "It means someone committed fraud." Those 4 words changed everything. Over the next several weeks, my lawyer and his team launched a thorough investigation. They compared signatures, reviewed property records, and traced the timeline of the house sale. The deeper they looked, the uglier the truth became. The will presented by my family contained inconsistencies. Several signatures appeared suspicious. Important registration dates didn't match official records. Someone had carefully created a web of deception. But they had made mistakes, and those mistakes were beginning to unravel. Meanwhile, my relatives continued living as though they had won. My brother acted especially confident. He drove a newer car, wore expensive clothes, and openly bragged about the money he had received from selling the house. The very house my mother had spent her lifetime paying for. One afternoon, I received unexpected news. My cousin called me. "You heard about the family gathering next weekend?" "No. They're having a huge celebration." "A celebration for what?" She hesitated. "Your brother is hosting it at your mother's old house." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The audacity stunned me. Not only had they stolen the house, but now they were throwing a party inside it. A few minutes later, I received an invitation. I knew exactly why they sent it. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted everyone to see that they had won. My lawyer smiled when I showed him the invitation. "Perfect," he said. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes people expose themselves better than any investigation ever could." The day of the gathering arrived. Cars filled the driveway. Music echoed through the neighborhood. Relatives laughed and chatted in the backyard where my mother had once grown roses. Walking through the gate felt surreal. Every corner of the property carried memories of her, yet the people responsible for stealing it were celebrating as if nothing had happened. As soon as I arrived, conversations grew quiet. Some relatives stared, others avoided eye contact. My aunt smirked from across the yard. My uncle shook his head as though I were an embarrassment. Then my brother approached. "I can't believe you actually came," he said. "I was invited." He laughed. "You still can't let this go, can you?" I simply smiled. That seemed to irritate him even more. Because unlike every previous encounter, I wasn't angry. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't begging for answers. I already had them. As the afternoon continued, speeches began. My uncle stood before the guests and raised a glass. "Family is everything," he announced. The irony almost made me laugh. Then my lawyer quietly nodded at me. It was time I stepped forward. "Before everyone leaves," I said, "I'd like to share something." The crowd turned toward me. My brother rolled his eyes, my aunt folded her arms, my uncle looked annoyed. Slowly, I placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were copies of the original deed, bank records, expert reports, and legal findings. Silence spread across the yard. "What is this?" my brother demanded. "My mother's real deed." The color drained from his face. I continued. "The deed proving she left the house to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My lawyer stepped beside me and began explaining the evidence. Every sentence tightened the noose around their lies. Every document destroyed another excuse. Relatives who had once supported my family stared in disbelief. Whispers spread rapidly, confusion turned into shock, shock turned into outrage. For months they had believed I was the liar. Now they were discovering who the real liars were. My uncle's hands trembled. My aunt looked ready to faint. My brother could barely speak. And as I watched their carefully constructed world collapse in front of everyone, I realized something powerful. The truth had finally arrived, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The family gathering ended in complete chaos. Relatives who had spent months believing my family's lies suddenly demanded answers. Conversations erupted all over the yard. Some people confronted my uncle directly. Others questioned my brother about the forged documents. No one was celebrating anymore. The music stopped, the laughter disappeared, all that remained was the ugly truth. My lawyer advised me not to argue with anyone. The evidence would speak for itself in court, so I left quietly. Behind me, the family that had betrayed me was beginning to tear itself apart. The following months were filled with legal hearings, investigations, and endless paperwork. It was exhausting, but for the first time since my mother's death, I felt hopeful. The original deed became the most important piece of evidence. Experts confirmed its authenticity. Handwriting specialists exposed inconsistencies in the forged will. Bank records revealed suspicious transactions connected to the sale of the property. One by one, the lies unraveled. Each court session brought new revelations. My uncle had coordinated much of the fraud. My aunt had helped convince relatives that the fake documents were legitimate. My brother had knowingly benefited from the illegal sale. The judge listened carefully as all the evidence was presented. When the final hearing arrived, the courtroom was silent. I sat beside my lawyer, my hands shaking. Across the room sat the people I once called family. They avoided looking at me. For a brief moment, I remembered happier times, holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, and family photographs. It was painful to realize that greed had destroyed all of it. Then the judge began reading the decision. Every word felt like a heartbeat. The forged documents were declared invalid. The property transfer was ruled unlawful. The sale of the house was reversed. Ownership legally belonged to me. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I had imagined this moment countless times. Yet now that it had finally arrived, I felt strangely calm. The battle was over. Justice had won. As I left the courthouse, my lawyer smiled. "Your mother would be proud of you." His words nearly brought me to tears. A few weeks later, I stood outside the house once again, the same house where I had taken my first steps, the same house where my mother had tucked me into bed every night, the same house that had been stolen from me. This time, however, I held the keys. The front gate creaked as I pushed it open. The yard looked different. The flowers my mother loved were gone. Several plants had withered. The garden seemed lonely. Still, it was home. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Silence greeted me. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating tiny particles of dust floating in the air. For a moment, I simply stood there. Memories rushed toward me from every corner of the house. I could almost hear my mother's laughter from the kitchen. I could almost see her sitting in her favorite chair by the window. I walked slowly through each room. The living room, the hallway, the kitchen, the staircase, every step carried a memory. Eventually, I entered my mother's bedroom. The room was empty now, but her presence still felt strong. On the windowsill sat a small framed photograph that had somehow remained untouched. It showed the two of us smiling in the backyard years earlier. I picked it up carefully. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not because I was sad, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something. This fight had never been about money. It had never been about property. It was about protecting my mother's legacy. It was about honoring the sacrifices she had made throughout her life. And it was about refusing to let dishonesty erase the truth. Later that evening, I walked into the backyard and stood beneath the setting sun. The sky glowed with the same golden colors my mother loved. I opened her final letter and read the last lines once more. Never let anyone take away what is meant for you. For months, those words had guided me through darkness. Now they felt like a blessing. My family had stolen a house, but in the end, they lost something far greater. They lost trust, they lost respect, and they lost the chance to remain part of my life. As for me, I gained something priceless. The truth, and standing in my mother's home once again, I knew her legacy was finally safe.